But he ends by the time he's done.
I love it.
And into chapter 3, he's just like, though the flock disappear from the pen and there are no herds in the stalls, yet I will celebrate in the Lord.
Come on.
Now rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord, my Lord, is my strength. Like, and then it's for the choir director on Street. It's
because
like,
I'm singing like David.
I didn't know if made a song out of this.
I'm singing like David up in here.
Yo, welcome back to the Vibes Daily Podcast. It is day 275 of our year-long series we have titled Devoted, as we journey through the entire Bible from cover to cover, from Genesis to Revelation. You have joined us in 3 books today. Habbakuk, Zephaniah, and Haggai are the 3 books that we will cover. And I am back again, joined by my wife, Victoria, as we continue to make our way through these minor prophets. We have these short books, but still like in-depth books. And, you know, I will just say up front, kind of even after discussing yesterday's, I feel like we are not doing these books the full justice by kind of walking through them here. And so I say that to also just encourage all of us to make sure we're actually reading this fully. Because we're only going to get to kind of highlight a few things and talk about some things that stick out to us specifically. But I definitely encourage you to make sure you're reading these books as well, because there's so much richness and wealth of wisdom and understanding in these. So, but getting that preface out the way, let's talk about Habbakuk, who, you know, some say Habbakuk, I don't know, but who is a prophet that we don't really know a whole lot about. We don't get that in his books. Some books, the prophet will tell us who they are. Like we'll get to with Zephaniah, for instance, he's going to tell us generations of who he belongs to. But we don't get that with Habbakuk. But there are some clues in the scripture to understand about the time that this was written. It's believed to be kind of before the Babylonian conquest of Judah, but probably after Israel's being conquered by Assyria. And it's a very interesting book because rather than God kind of talking to Habbakuk to give a message to the people, it feels like Habbakuk is talking to God about the people. Right?
Yes. Like, it's really a one-on-one, like, Lord, explain this to me. Or Lord, talk to me about this.
Yeah, it's really backwards and different than we're used to with our prophets, right? And so I love it, though. I love that. It makes it a very unique book and a unique perspective. Reminds me a little bit of Job, when Job kind of has conversations with God and he kind of understands something. Because Habbakuk, his big issue is like, God, why would you use Babylon to conquer us?
Yes.
Like, they are unrighteous and they are wicked, yet you're going to use them to fulfill your will. It's kind of like this big thing that he kind of goes back and forth and prays about, and God gets some answers too. So talk to me a little bit about what stuck out to you. We only have, I think, 3 chapters in this whole book. But talk to me a little about what stuck out to you in his prayer and maybe even God's answers to you.
Yeah. I think like you said, these prayers are what stuck out to me initially. That like he has his first prayer and then his second prayer that he's praying these prayers to God, and it is like this, like, how long, Lord? Like, I think I can resonate with him right here in verse 2, where he's like, how long, Lord, must I call for help and you do not listen, or cry out to you about violence and you do not save? And like because it's like these, like you said, he didn't use good people to punish the Israelites, right? God used evil people. So he's like, how could you let these evil people overtake us, right? Like, how are you using evil for good? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And you're not listening. Like, are you even hearing me? Like, I'm crying out and I feel like I'm not getting any response from you because I'm still seeing destruction around me. Like, bad things are still happening. So, like, are you even listening to me? And so, that was the first thing that resonated to me. But even here in this verse 4, when he's like, this is why the law is ineffective and justice never emerges, for the wicked restrict the righteous, therefore justice comes out perverted. And it's like the law actually was like never supposed to be like the totality of what God wanted for his people, right? Like the law was supposed to be to just tell us how we are sinners and tell us how we can be more righteous, right? And show us that. But like I said, when people start to distort it and misuse it, and like there's just no justice there, right? And that's why we need Jesus.
Yeah.
That's why we need Jesus.
I think like this first prayer, like I took it at first as I started reading it as like Habbakuk really questioning the wickedness that was happening in Judah at first. And I'm not saying this is just as I read it through what I first understood. It wasn't until kind of going back and seeing the big picture that I thought maybe it is about Babylon. But at first I thought like he was just calling out Israel, right? Because that's kind of what most of these prophets are doing. They're calling out Israel, Judah, and kind of what they're doing. And so when he responds in this answer of just like, okay, well, I'm getting ready to conquer them. Essentially, I'm bringing these Chaldeans, as we see in verse 6, right? I'm raising them up. Then he kind of responds, in verse 12, like talking about like, hold up, like, you're not from eternity, Lord my God, my Holy One, you will not die. You appointed them to execute judgment and you destined them to punish us. Like, your eyes are too pure to look on evil, and you cannot tolerate wrongdoing. So why do you tolerate those who are treacherous, right? Yeah. And so like I couldn't tell if that was a response of like, oh yeah, you're worried about the sin. Well, I'll take care of that. I'm gonna take care of that by bringing these Chaldeans. And he's like, wait a minute, but these Chaldeans
are terrible. They're
terrible people. They're treacherous. Like, why would you use them? But
they used to a little short, but that's the one that I liked. Is it's like, why are you silent while one who is wicked swallows up one who is more righteous than himself?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think like there's two things that like stick out to me is definitely just that willingness for God to have this conversation. Like I just appreciate that God was willing to hear his prayers and give him answers and like go back and forth. And again, it reminds me a lot of that Job conversation. But I do think like what he's pointing out is what God is trying to point out to Habbakuk is that like ultimately, man, you guys are wicked too. Like, like, and there's not this, I don't have this, I can't stand any wickedness, right? And ultimately, like, this is the judgment, because when he gets to chapter 2, I think it's interesting, like, chapter 2, verse 2 is a verse that's quoted often, right? Like, write down the vision, clearly inscribe it on tablets so that many easily can read it. You probably have heard, write the vision, make it plain. Like, that's the King James kind of version of it. And reading it this time, I was kind of like, all right, this verse is not about what people say. This verse is about, like, this is not about how people use this. Write
down what you want to come.
It's not how people use this verse.
Write down the vision that the Lord's given you.
That is not what he said. God is telling Habakkuk, look, I want you to pay attention to what I'm about to tell you, the people, and I need you to write it down so that they know. Because ultimately you're asking some good questions. I want the people to know exactly why I'm doing it this way, right? And he's like, because the vision is yet for the appointed time. It testifies about the end and will not lie, though it delays, wait for it, since it will certainly come and not be late. His ego is inflated. He is without integrity, but the righteous one will live by his faith. And so like he keeps going on, but ultimately he's just like, look, there's still sin here.
Yes.
And so this judgment has to come. And he goes on to kind of say woe to all of these different people, right? In chapter 2, these different those who amass what is not his. He says, woe to those who dishonestly make wealth.
Right.
Woe to those who build a city with bloodshed. Woe to those who give his neighbors drink, pouring out their wrath. And then I think there's one more. Oh, woe to those who say to wood, wake up, or to mute stone, come alive. He essentially build idols, right? And so like he then goes on to say, like, don't forget all of your sins, right, that you guys have made. And so I have the right to use kind of whom I will. But what else jumped out to you kind of in his prayers and responses?
Yeah, that's really good, though. I'm glad you like summarized that for me, because the progression of their conversation, I got lost in the weeds. I got lost in these details. About the big picture. You know me. I be in the details. Yeah. You be over here, the big picture. Big picture. Let's go. And I be like, I can't go big because I'm in the details. Yeah. But because I got stopped at verse 1, chapter 2. I got stuck there, and like, I mean, the fact that he just stopped and was like, okay, I asked, but I'm going to stand at my guard post and station myself on the lookout tower. I will watch to see what he will say to me and what I should reply about my complaint. Like, he's like, I made this petition to the Lord. I prayed. Now I'm going to wait and watch like a watchman on his tower for the Lord's response. Mm-hmm. Like, and you know, as we read, like, these watchmen, like, they don't go to sleep. Right. We're not nodding off on the job. We're not forgetting what our job is. Like, we are alert and waiting. And I think that challenged me because there are times where I pray a prayer and forget. Yeah. Like, I pray a prayer and then a day or two later, I forget that what I prayed for. Yeah. I'm not consistent in my praying, right? Or I pray and then I just be like, well, guess the Lord's just not going to answer me, right? And it's been 72 hours. Like, but like for him, he was just like, I'm just going to diligently wait and watch for the Lord, because it's not like a if. I mean, he did start out this book talking about, well, will the Lord not answer me, right? But here he stands and waits because he knows the Lord's going to answer him, right? Like, although my heart's grieving as if you're not going to answer me, I know my God, and I know he's going to answer me. And so I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait, alert, attentive, and patiently, right? Yeah. And so that was a challenge to my heart. So yeah, I got stuck there.
That is you, though. It is you, I think.
Because I was like, that's so good. And then I forgot that this was a response. Like, and then the Lord responds.
Yeah, he does respond in verse 2. The very next verse. He does give some answers. But, yeah, so yeah, that's kind of a big idea of Habbakuk. He ultimately goes on, and in chapter 3, we kind of start to see him turn to trust in God some. Like, he still does ask some of the questions about like who he's angry against and things of that nature. But he ends, by the time he's done, I love it. And into chapter 3, he's just like, I heard and this is verse 16. I heard and trembled within. My lips quivered at the sound. Rottenness entered my bones. I trembled where I stood. Now I must quietly wait for the day of distress to come against the people invading us. Because though the fig tree does not bud, and there's no fruit on the vines, though the olive crop fails, and the field produces no food, though the flock disappear from the pen, and there are no herds in the stalls, yet I will celebrate in the Lord. Come on. And I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord, my Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like those of deer. It enables me to walk on mountain heights. Like, and then it's for the choir director on street. It's
because like, I'm singing like David.
I didn't know all of a sudden made a song out of this.
I'm singing like David up in here. I'm
worshiping it. Yeah, like by the time he's done with this back and forth, like God has told him, just trust me. Like, I'm doing this. I have a will for this. The righteous will still that's one of the verses. I don't know if we talk about in verse 4, right? But the righteous one, chapter 2, verse 4, but the righteous one will live by his faith. Like, don't worry about that. The righteous one is going to be fine. They'll live. Trust me. This is what I'm doing. And by the time he comes out of it, he's just like, all right, though I can't see how it's going to work out. I can't see because the fig tree's still not budding. There's no fruit on the vine. The olive crop still fails.
We still struggling.
We're still out here struggling. Though all those things are happening and I can't see how this is going to work out, I will rejoice in the Lord, the God of my salvation. The Lord, my Lord, is my strength. Like, I love this ending.
Like, can he just teach us something in life real quick? Like, can he just show us how we are supposed to act? I feel like he is challenging me, at least. I don't know why anybody else. He's challenging me in that, like, though the Lord said something was going to happen, I don't see any evidence of that right now. I don't see any of this happening yet. I can sit back and say, okay, yes, Lord. Yeah. And then sit back and still worship and still be like declaring the Lord, you are good, right? Yeah. Like, I'm going to rejoice in the Lord, like, and be delightful. Yeah. Although my circumstance has not changed, but just because you said so. Yeah. I'm going to have enough reason to rejoice.
Yeah. It's really good.
Like, you told me to quit my job and to do and that blessings gonna come. I don't see nothing. Bills still due. I'm still like behind.
Yeah.
Not hungry, but just hungry. You know, and yet I can still rejoice in the Lord.
Yeah.
For the things that you're doing and the things that you said that you will do.
Yeah.
Come on, somebody.
Yeah, no, that's good. Like I said, it's really good and definitely challenging. It's the question that, I tend to pose often, right? It's just like, can we do that? Even when it doesn't look the way we want it to, even when we haven't got the results we wanted, we haven't got the promise yet, or the promise didn't look the way we wanted to, whatever the case may be. And I think Habbakuk really challenges us in that. So, yeah, really good place to end there. Zephaniah, as we kind of transition some, I told you, Zephaniah gives us his whole life story. He is the son of Cushi, who's the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, right? So like he actually has royal lineage, like this is King Hezekiah. And he's living kind of in the days of Josiah specifically. And, one of the things that jumps out to me about Zephaniah is it reminds me a little bit of kind of Joel, because there's this kind of call for repentance in the center of it.
Yes.
But we also get this picture of the day of the Lord. Like that's kind of a consistent theme of what this day will be like. And so again, it reminds me a little bit of Joel specifically. But what jumps out to you here in the book of Zephaniah?
There's like no delay here. It's just like, I'm just going to destroy. Like, there was no workup. I've talked about this out. Like, the Lord will tell you the why. I'm sweeping everybody out. Everything's gone from the face of the earth. Like, I'm about to sweep away the people, the animals, the birds, the sky, the fishes. I'm about to do away with all of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, there was just no, like, workup. No warm up here. But then he says he's going to stretch his hand out against Judah, right? And going in about their worship of different idols and stuff here. I think that's what jumped out to me really was that, like, I'm going to cut off every vestige of Baal from this place, the names of the pagan priests along with the priests, right? Like the pagan priests and my priests, right?
Yeah.
To those who bow and worship on the rooftops, to the stars in the sky, those who bow and pledge loyalty to the Lord, but also pledge loyalty to Milcom. Like I'm the 1 foot in, 1 foot out people. Like, I'm coming for you, right? And I think that's what it showed me here. This dual nature. Like, these are people. He said in verse 6. He said, "And those who turn back from following the Lord, who do not seek the Lord and inquire Him." Like, I'm going after those people who might say that they come to me in one moment but don't in another, right? Yeah. Like, you go to me to inquire about one thing, then you go to Milcom and to inquire about something else, or you go and serve the stars at one point, and then you come into my temple in sacrificing offerings, right? Or bringing offerings and sacrifices. And so, to me, I think that's the big thing that just stuck out.
Yeah. I think what I'm just remembering, and I think like if we had gone through this reading plan chronologically, right? Like just kind of remembering King Josiah, who was, essentially a king that kind of brought reform to Judah, right? At that time, like, because his daddy and his granddaddy was like crazy. Right? If you remember, Hezekiah was cool.
He was good
king. His son was wilding. His grandson was wilding. Right? They were bad. But like Josiah becomes kind of a good king, right? And so I think what's interesting is to know that like this prophecy comes at that time when, again, after these really bad kings that have come, that like he is calling out those same sins that I believe Josiah ultimately recognizes as well. And he leads the people through essentially repentance, and Zephaniah kind of becomes a part of that. Is kind of how I read this. So I just thought it was interesting because in most of the prophecies we read and the prophets we read, people didn't listen. They didn't really do anything. But it seems as if Zephaniah's message was somewhat effective, right, at that time. Now again, it didn't last because ultimately they still get conquered. But for that people in that time, because in chapter 2, right, he says, gather yourselves together, undesirable nation, before the decree takes effect, and the day passes like chaff before the burning of the Lord's anger overtakes you. Before the day of the Lord's anger overtake you, seek the Lord, all you humble of the earth who carry out his commands. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you will be concealed on the day of the Lord's anger. Right. And so, like, again, very similar message as Joel. Perhaps the God will relent, right? If we kind of take time to repent and turn. And, you know, we keep bringing this up. Righteousness and humility just always seem to kind of be tied together.
Always.
Like, what God expects is that humility piece specifically. But yeah, anything else kind of here in 2 or 3 of Zephaniah?
Yeah, I think so it's interesting because I loved how you called out that he's royalty, right? And royal lineage, and probably even speaking to people in the royal courts, like he said in chapter 1 verse 8, right? On the days Lord's sacrifice, I'll punish the officials, the king's sons, all who are dressed in foreign clothing. And so I saw that here, and I think it's something to note because you talk about like the Lord talking about the leaders and the people who are supposed to be leading all the rest of the people.
Yeah.
And I feel like he has that ear for them. But as he's continuing to deliver this message, this part jumped out to me because I feel like the Lord continues to go and use people from inside royalty to sheep breeders, right? To all these different people to deliver his message time and time again. Like he's using different avenues. He's using people to do demonstrations, and he's using people to just speak and you know, demonstrate through their lives. And so it's like at this point he's used a variety of different people, right? And then we get to chapter 3 verse 7, and I feel like this is the Lord saying, like, I thought you will certainly fear me and accept correction. Then her dwelling place would not be cut off, based on all that I had allocated to her. However, they became more corrupt in all their actions. And so to me, just that part stuck out to me because it's like, I feel like the Lord was just like, you would think that after all that I've been trying to do, and although I've shown them who I am and who I could be, like, you would think that they would accept this correction. Yeah. But no, they're just going to become more corrupt in everything that they do. Yeah. And so it's like, therefore, just wait. Verse 8, it's like, okay, just wait then. Just do what you do then. And just wait until I come and plunder you. Yeah. And destroy your kingdom. Yeah, because I mean, it goes back to verse 2 of chapter 3, right? Where it's like, he's like, she's not obeyed, she's not accepted discipline. This is all about the city, about Jerusalem and Judah. She's not trusted in the Lord. She's not drawn near to her God, right? And so, like you said, you would think that would be the case, but no, she hadn't. And that just also keeps going back to me, one of the big ideas I've taken from these, probably the last couple readings in these prophets, is this day of the Lord. Yeah. Because, like, I don't know, man. Like I said, I think I've really been just struck by how violent and, like, I don't know, just devastating the day of the Lord is. Yeah. Right? Like when God, because essentially it's a reference to, like, when God says enough is enough. Ooh, wait. And when he says, I'm stepping in and here's the judgment. Like, that is a devastating day. Yeah. And again, I mean, we've talked about it before. Like, the reality is it's devastating for those who are in sin, right? Like, when that day comes. For those that are righteous, it's a beautiful day, right? You're good. You're restored. You're straight. But for those that aren't, man, it's devastating. And I think that piece, like, that phrase, man, has referred to so much. It's referred to, like, the judgment that came on Israel. It's referred to the judgment that came on Judah with, like, you know, Assyrian conquering them and then Babylon conquering them. It's referred to the final judgment that Jesus will come, like the day of the Lord. I mean, ultimately, it can even refer to the day that we die, right? Yeah. In our last day here, that will be the day that we will stand before the Lord, and we will live up to and have to face up to judgment for what we've done. And so I don't know, I've really just wrestled with this idea that, like, there is a day coming for all of us. Yeah, at some point, right? And where we stand and where we will be
it's up to us, like, and what God has called us to, like, because we could be, as he goes on in verse 9, like, that would be a part of those that he restores, right? I will then restore pure speech to the people, and so all that may call on the name of the Lord and serve him for single purposes. Like, he goes on to just talk about eventually, like, these that will take refuge in him, in the name of the Lord is in verse 12, right? But like, we could be those people, the meek and the humble that he leaves and that he builds a remnant with, or we can be the arrogant and we can be the rebellious, and we can be those people. But at some point, the day of the Lord is coming for all of us. And again, that can refer to the day that we die. It can refer to some just day of judgment that God is going to eventually bring upon us in this life. It can refer to the last days, whatever it is. That day is coming, and we got to decide for ourselves where we will stand. And I don't know, that piece really just jumped out to me this week.
No, definitely. And I just pray, and this is my prayer, because like, as someone who has struggled with pride, right? Like, I have struggled with thinking I knew more than others or was better than, or, you know, someone who struggled with pride, and just seeing how the Lord has like stripped things from me to like humble me, right? Like, I pray that I am verse 12, right? Like, I pray that I get to the point where like the Lord will say, yeah, you are part of the meek and humble that I'm going to leave. Yeah. Right. And that can take refuge in my name. Right. And that I'm going to use to build the rest of my kingdom with. Right. Yeah. Like, I think if any of this shows me anything, is just like the Lord, he is trying to humble his people through these different acts. Right. And that the ultimate goal is to have this humble, meek posture so that we can live in relationship with God and rely solely on him, right? Yeah. And so I feel like I wouldn't want to go through all of this and yet still be stubborn and hard-hearted, right? And prideful and ruthless towards others, right? Like I feel like all of this is just to and all these warnings is because the Lord's like, okay, before, I don't want to have to give you the whooping. Just become gentle and humble, right? Yeah.
That's good. It's hopefully again, to your point, we're not verse 7 of chapter 3, right?
We're not trying to be that.
I thought you would have turned.
I thought you would have turned, but you still cutting up.
Still doing it. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Haggai.
Haggai, which was 2 chapters here at the end, and probably could have gone really well with Zechariah in some ways, just because they kind of take place at similar time periods. But we get Haggai, which again travels back in time some. We're actually kind of going forward, I guess, from what we've just been talking about. We're going forward in time because we're going to the exile, the return, essentially at this point, where the people of Judah are coming back to rebuild the temple. If timeline wise, this lines up with like where we were in Ezra and Nehemiah when we were reading those books. And we actually heard Haggai's name in those books. Because if you recall, there was a point where the people were really discouraged and they didn't want to build anymore because like the king had sent, or they had all this opposition, and so they had got the king to kind of create this decree that they couldn't build, and then they had to like go back and say, well, King Cyrus said we could, and there's that whole back and forth piece. But like there was a Haggai in there that was referred to, this Haggai who encouraged them and said like build the temple, right? And so we get that here in these 2 chapters,
and so much more.
A lot more here. But what jumps out to you? The big idea here is definitely that him encouraging Zerubbabel and the rest of the people to rebuild the temple. What encouraged you, or what stuck out to you here about Haggai?
Yeah, I think the first thing that jumped out was verse 2. I got past verse 1 this time. It's verse 2.
That's because verse 1 just tells you who is what, but that's fine.
But you know what? Listen, I did start going back in my book, looking up stuff again. But anyways, I got past that. In verse 2, it was about these like some people saying one thing and God saying another, right? And so that stuck out to me. Where it's like, these people say that the time has not come for the house of the Lord to be rebuilt. He's like, but what's what I said, right? But the word of the Lord came through prophet Haggai. Is it time for you? yourselves to live in your paneled houses while this house lies in ruins. Now the Lord of armies says this, think carefully about your ways, right? You have done all this planting and sowing. I'm paraphrasing now. But you're doing all this planting and sowing, right? But you just never seem satisfied. Like you're doing all this work, but you're not seeing any fruit from it, right? Yeah. Why do you think that is? Like he's saying in verse 7, like think carefully about your ways. Why do you think so? Yeah. And he's like, because like you expected much, but you got little. Why? And it's because you've been focusing on your own house when my house still lies in ruins. And these people, as in the verse 2, these people are saying it's not the time to build the Lord's house. Yeah. But the Lord is like, no, I sent you guys back to build my house, right? Yeah. I did not send you back from exile to just build back Jerusalem and just build up, the city again, right? And just to live and plant and harvest and do all these things. No, I sent you back so that you can build up my temple again, so that I can dwell with you guys again, and be back in relationship with you guys again, and so that you guys can continue to be a light to the world. Yeah. I mean, I think chapter 1 is very much just about priorities, man. Like, just understanding where we place our personal ambitions in the order of sequence, right? When it comes to God's will, like there really is. I mean, Jesus teaches this in Matthew 5, right? 5-6, Matthew 6, where he's like, seek first the kingdom, right, and His righteousness. And then all these other things will be added unto you. Where you gonna eat, where you gonna live, what you gonna wear, those things that you're worried about. Yeah. Those things will happen once you seek first my kingdom. Once you deal with that first, right? We'll get to that next week. We're in Matthew. But like that's the idea here. He's like, while you're worried about your stuff, you have neglected me. Yes. And we do this so much, man. Like how often, and again, this might seem like basic and practical, but like how often have we like put off serving and loving and attending and doing these things related to like our church or to our lifestyle, our spiritual lifestyle, whatever the case may be, for the sake of the things we're pursuing. Going back to my question yesterday, right? I'm like, look, God, I got a plan. I'm trying to go be a teacher. I'm trying to do these things. That thing you called me to do, to preach, I will get to that when I have time. Yeah, like when I'm grown. Like when I'm like grown, then like I had my fun. Right, like, or just be on the weekends, kind of thing. But like I'm gonna go take care of me first in this plan. And like we so often do that where it's like I don't have time to serve because I'm working overtime, right? Or I don't have money to spend on the poor and the needy because I'm trying to save for this car, or I'm trying to save for this house, or I'm trying, whatever it may be, right? Yeah, like I don't have time to like read this thing called the Bible because I'm binge watching. I'm binge watching my show. The game is on. I'm sleepy. I'm tired. Come on, sleep. Whatever, right? Like that spoke to me. So many things that we prioritize over God's will for our life. And I think that's what Haggai is challenging us in this first chapter. And then to your point, he's also adding to that, like, have you ever just paid attention to why you aren't getting where you're trying to go? Come on. You just working and going nowhere. Yeah. Maybe it's because you out of His will. You just outside of His will and you're not on the right path, and maybe you should evaluate that. And so, like I said, same thing we said last week, like this is not some universal formula for like if things are going bad in your life, then maybe you're outside of His will. Yeah, no, not at all. We've seen that, examples of that you can be in His will and still have suffering. In fact, often does come with suffering. But I do think it does have us question our priorities and make sure that we're prioritizing His will over our own and our own desires. And I think that, again, it's a natural human tendency, man. Like, I'm going to go take care of my stuff. I'm going to get this together. Like I'm gonna get a good job and have a nice house and all that stuff before I be fruitful and multiply, right? Before I build my family, before I do those things. Like it's always our plan and what we think makes sense to us before we say, all right, now submit to what God has for us, right? So, but we get some practical kind of narrative here because then Zerubbabel, again, they're discouraged and he kind of reminds them, like, I'm with you, right? This is verse 13. Like, that's good. I've still got your back. I'm still here. Go ahead and move forward with building this. And Zerubbabel kind of takes that, as we know, ultimately, and does that. But
chapter 2. Well, anything that jumped out to you in chapter 2 as we close out today?
Yeah, I think it's just it's interesting that the Lord, and just sweet of the Lord to just be encouraging them through this tough time. Because as you said in Ezra and Nehemiah, this did not look like what the Lord was saying it would look like when they returned, right?
Right.
It was supposed to be like, nobody's going to mess with you. It's this beautiful return. The Lord's going to be with you, and it's going to be plush, and there's going to be blessing, and you multiply again. It seemed real, like, whimsical. But when they arrived, it was a lot of, like, struggle and hindrances and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I see the Lord meeting them here, especially in, like, verse 4, like, be strong, Zerubbabel. This is the Lord's declaration. Be strong, Joshua of Jehozadak, high priest. Be strong, all of you people of the land. This is the Lord's declaration. Work, for I am with you. And so he said, this is the promise I made to you when you came out of Egypt, and my spirit is present among you. Don't be afraid. And so it's like he's giving them this encouragement, because I'm sure they're discouraged, because they're like, this is not what we thought it would look like, right? Or this might be harder than I anticipated it to be. Lord, are you even here? Like, is this even what you want us to do? Like, should we even be here? Because we just made this trek back from Babylon, like, risked our lives, like, wasn't sure if we were going to get killed along the way or not.
Yeah.
Now we get here, people are against us, and looks like a big project, and there's only a handful of us here, like. But I think it's so reassuring that the Lord is just like, yeah, I've called you to do big things, but it's because I'm with you.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. Well, there's a couple things in that into that I really loved. You were talking about kind of that be strong, but even going back a little bit, one of the things I appreciate is, and I talk about verse 3 with verse 9.
Yeah.
Because, like, he kind of points out that this temple is not as nice as Solomon's temple,
sure is.
right? He's just like, who remembers it? You're going to look at it and go, man, that's not even as nice. But I love verse 9 because it says, the final glory of this house will be greater than the first, says the Lord of armies. And I will provide peace in this place. This is the declaration of the Lord. It's like, it may not look like much. It may not look as good as you thought it would. You might actually remember the old one. You might have some memories of it or know about the old one. It might actually be sad about this. Right?
Yeah.
If we remember, even in Ezra, they were crying when they laid the foundation.
They sure did.
Right, of this, because they were just like remembering the old one. It was just like, this isn't as good.
Yeah.
This isn't. But I love that he's just like, don't even worry about that. Because the final glory of this house, when it's all said and done, it's going to be greater.
It's going to be great.
Just obey me and just do what I ask you to do. And
yes.
So, I don't know, I just love that you said that encouragement, also just pointing that out. And then at the end of kind of verses 10 through 19, there was this interesting challenge about just being holy.
Yes.
Because he just kind of points out, like, just because something is holy and you come in contact with it doesn't make you holy.
Doesn't make you holy.
Right? In fact, it's the other way around. If you are defiled. And you touch it, you defile it, right? Versus it make you holy. So focus on you and making sure that you're holy and that you're in the right space and place. Because that's important more so than it is that you're just trying to be around what's holy and do those things and thinking that that's going to make you better per se. So I don't know. I thought it was just a very interesting illustration he gave to just remind you that, like, yeah, just because you eat holy bread don't make you holy. Like,
come on.
You know what I'm saying? Like, nah, you gotta work on it for yourself. But anything else that was here in Haggai that jumped out to you?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Feeling good? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I said, I know there was we went through 3 books there pretty quickly. So a lot there, but again, encourage you to make sure that you are reading and reading along, and man, share your own thoughts, observations, maybe something that we skipped over that you thought was interesting.
Yeah.
And share that with us. But last thought here, did just mention it kind of in that we do pick up in Matthew starting on Monday. And so again, want to encourage you to invite others to be a part of this reading plan. As you go through the New Testament, we'll get the words of Jesus, the life of Jesus. It's a great place to start reading the Bible. Even if you're reading it for the very first time, the Gospels is an amazing place to begin that reading. So hope you'll join us there. Come back and see us tomorrow as we cover Zephaniah for the next couple days. And then we'll end with Malachi as we close out the the Old Testament. But
Yeah.
appreciate you joining us. Take care, and until then, God bless.
Thank you for joining us for the Vibes Daily Podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or download our favorite, the Vibes Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.